that ring.
Dubbin, this is what you
knew what to expect from Nate, and he...
right hand that is found.
Wearing black and white.
Fighter, G-second.
Is Jake Paul good for boxing or bad? Jake Paul, the best or worst thing to happen to boxing? Jake Paul, the most talked about name in boxing right now. But the question is he saving the sport or is he ruining it? Love him or hate him, one thing is clear, Jake Paul has brought massive attention to boxing, but is it for the right reasons? Some say he's nothing but a YouTube entertainer who doesn't belong in the ring. Others believe he's exactly what boxing needs to stay relevant. So, is Jake Paul good for boxing or bad? Let's break it all down. How Jake Paul entered the boxing world. Let's rewind. How did a YouTuber turn into one of boxing's biggest stars? Jake Paul started as a Vine and YouTube star, famous for his wild pranks and viral videos. But in 2018, he stepped into the boxing ring for the first time against another YouTuber, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞. It was supposed to be just a fun influencer boxing match, but Jake took it seriously. He won that fight, and suddenly he saw a new opportunity. Jake trained harder and made his pro debut in 2020 against fellow YouTuber 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, another win.
And now he's down again.
Then came Nate Robinson, a former NBA player, another knockout.
Oh my God!
But let's be real, these weren't real fighters, they were athletes from other backgrounds. That's when things got interesting. Jake started calling out MMA fighters. Ben Askren knocked out in one round.
Get my money, Jake! Get my motherfucking money, Jake!
Tyron Woodley beat him twice.
Time to step into the...
Anderson Silva, a legitimate striker, and Jake still won. At this point, it was clear. Jake Paul wasn't just playing around. He was making serious money, attracting millions of viewers, and shaking up the entire boxing world. The case for Jake Paul in boxing. He's bringing a new audience to the sport. Boxing was losing popularity, numbers were declining, and only hardcore fans were tuning in. Then Jake Paul steps in and suddenly, boxing is trending again. Millions of young fans who never cared about boxing before are now watching, buying tickets, and engaging. His fight with Nate Diaz reportedly sold over 500,000 PPVs. Compare that to some world championship fights that barely hit 200,000. He's creating bigger paydays for fighters. Here's something Jake Paul deserves credit for: fighter pay. He's constantly called out UFC and boxing promoters for underpaying fighters. He even started his own promotional company to pay fighters more. Amanda Serrano, one of the greatest female boxers, got her biggest payday thanks to Jake Paul's influence. And that's something you can't ignore. He's actually training and improving. At first, many called him a joke, but over the years, he's worked with legit trainers and sparred with real fighters. He's not just showing up to cash a check, he's improving his technique, his cardio, and his boxing IQ. The case against Jake Paul in boxing: he's fighting non-boxers. Here's the biggest complaint from boxing fans: Jake Paul hasn't beaten a real, active professional boxer. He's fought ex-MMA fighters, retired athletes, and fellow YouTubers. But where are the real boxers? Until he beats a true ranked boxer, many will never take him seriously. He's turning boxing into a circus. Boxing purists argue that Jake Paul is turning the sport into a reality show. Trash talk, staged press conferences, WWE-style promotions. Where does the sport end and the entertainment begin? For traditionalists, this feels more like a social media stunt than actual competition. He's skipping the line. Most fighters spend years grinding in small venues, fighting in the amateur circuit, working their way up. Jake Paul walks in, makes millions, and headlines pay-per-view events without going through that struggle. Is he really paying his dues, or is he just taking advantage of his fame? The final verdict is, so is Jake Paul good or bad for boxing? The truth is, it depends on how you look at it. If you're a traditional boxing fan, you probably think Jake Paul is bad for the sport. He hasn't fought top-level competition, and his antics overshadow real boxing talent. If you're looking at the business side, Jake Paul has undeniably helped boxing make money again. More views, more ticket sales, bigger paydays. He's keeping the sport relevant in the digital age. Maybe the question isn't, is Jake Paul good or bad for boxing? But rather, what does boxing need to do next? If the sport wants to grow, it might have to learn something from Jake Paul's playbook. Now, I want to hear from you. Is Jake Paul helping or hurting boxing? Let's settle this debate in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into boxing, sports, and entertainment. And don't miss my next video on the biggest controversies in boxing history.